Welcome. I'm going to just give it a minute as we're letting folks in the virtual door right now. So thanks for joining us. Really happy to have you all here. I'm see that attendee number growing. So we're just going to wait as folks come in to the webinar. We'll get started in just a minute. All right, well, I think that so far there's 173 of you. Oh, 175. So welcome, welcome. We are so very glad to have you here. And we have a lot of you joining us, so we're really happy to have you here. This is the first of a series of workshops that we're going to be offering over the next week. So we promise to show you here at the end of this session what those other sessions are that are coming up, and hope you can not only join for this one, but also for the coming sessions as well. I am here, for those of you that don't, we haven't met, I'm Becky Thompson. I serve in the role of Director of Student Financial Assistance. And presenting with me today will be Marla Skelly, that you'll hear from her later. You can see her hopefully now. And Gabrielle Matul-Wurst, who will also be presenting. But we also have a lot of other Student Achievement Council staff here that are really going to be monitoring your questions kind of throughout. So we want to talk a little bit about the technology today. Because there's so many of you, we are doing this in webinar format. And so you can't see, I can't see you. That's kind of the bummer part of it. But you can see us as presenters, as well as the slides that we'll be going through today. We very much want you to engage in asking any question that you might have by using the question and answer tool in the webinars. So just know that those questions will come to us behind the scenes. They will not be broadcast to the full group unless we are answering those. So you can send in your questions at any point in time. Us as presenters will pause throughout the session and to really start to field any questions that might come in as we go along. So please make sure that if you have questions that you are using that tool and sending them our way. And we are, just to keep in mind that we are recording this session, so it can be used later for viewing. Also know that we will be sharing the PowerPoint slides that we show here today, and that will also be sent to you afterwards as a resource. So what are we going to cover today in this session? We are going to really start with the legislative update. So what just happened in this last legislative session that is relevant to state financial aid. We are also going to talk about Washington College Grant and the College Bound Scholarship programs. This is not, this session isn't intended to be really in depth on those, but yet to talk about some of the highlights, some of the frequently asked questions that we might receive, or things that are newer to those programs. We will also be covering state work study at a high level, the participation renewal process, and WSAC initiatives and resources. And as I mentioned, kind of questions along the way. Before we really kind of get started, you know, in the presentation, the one thing that I wanted to really say up front is a huge thank you to you all. We could not do this work without you. We We are so honored to be in this work together with you in partnership. And we know that this last year has been incredibly challenging. And you, day in and day out, are really serving students. And we're so grateful for your work and for your partnership. So, you know, thank you. I don't know if you are getting enough thanks right now for the hard work in challenging circumstances. All right, so let's kind of dive in, and I wanted to start with just a very quick overview of the Student Achievement Council. We are so grateful to have a 9-member council that leads our work, that really represents different sectors as well as employment out in the state of Washington. Our work is really connected to the state's attainment goal of 70% statewide post-secondary attainment for Washingtonians. And we are a ways off from this. We have quite a bit of a gap, as you know, hear us state pretty much at every session that we do. And this is really, yes, for our workforce, but I also think very much important for Washingtonians, and that they're not being left behind in our economy, because we know that credentials are really needed for those growing and living wage jobs. Our work is guided by our council and our strategic plan. That strategic plan really has 4 really critical components centered on equity. And the idea here is that if we build an affordable, and that affordable is very much that piece about where state financial aid comes into play, as well as institutional aid, etc., federal aid. But we can't do it just with affordability. We also have to have a supportive educational environment so Washingtonians can enroll and complete their credentials. And I just want to talk for a minute about sort of what we see with enrollment right now. It's a little too early to see what we see in terms of who's receiving state financial assistance in the year 2021. We will get that with our unit record report, but this is probably trends that you're seeing on your campus, you know, very, very closely. So Gabi, if you don't mind going to the next, I just want to really highlight sort of the equity component of our work, and really thanks to the work with the state board as well as ERDC, really looking at where we see enrollments this past fall, and that we very much see disproportionate impact to students of color. And we see some very significant, you know, enrollment declines, you know, with the largest decline being in American Indian and Hispanic students. And so we want to really keep that as we move forward, in ensuring that we are really putting racial equity at the center of our work. So those slides are really for you to take a look at. And then of course, once the year wraps up on state financial aid, we'll be also looking at how this might look in terms of recipients, but really do believe that state financial aid has a role to play here in overall strategy of enrollment at colleges and and equity. So let's dive into the legislative session and what took place this last session that just wrapped up on April 25th. This was what is termed a long session. It's really, the legislators are building a budget for the next biennium, the next 2 years, and it ended as scheduled with no special session this year. The budget was just signed by the governor just yesterday. So that means that I don't have to say a lot of caveats when we talk about legislative session and you know, talking about the aid program. So we know that that budget was signed and that there were no vetoes related to state financial aid in that signing. So 4 bills that and 3 of which I'll dive in quite deeply on are these first 3. So about college-bound scholarship, equity, this is actually where residency comes up with 5194. We're going to briefly talk about a bill that you're probably very familiar with because you have been responding and administering the undocumented student emergency funding. And then I just wanted to also call your attention to the fact that Opportunity Scholarship was expanded through Substitute House Bill 1425. So let's start with the college bound, the changes to college bound that came through gross Substitute Senate Bill 5321. This was actually started with agency request legislation. So WSAC asked for changes in college bound based on our experiencing and administering the program and feedback from the community. And the, just from the top, I wanted to mention that this actually is not going to really change in any way how you are administering or sort of the rules associated with college bound on the post-secondary side. But because college bound is such a pipeline, it's really from that middle school year all the way through credential completion, wanted you to be well aware of the change that is taking place with college bound related to sign up. And we believe that this is really a positive change that can reduce the barriers of otherwise eligible students being able to access the program. So what the change here is that students that are eligible, so that includes 7th and 8th grade students that are free and reduced price lunch eligible, 9th graders, this came through in the last couple years, 9th graders that become free and reduced price eligible in 9th grade, but we're not eligible in 7th and 8th grade, but we're living in Washington. Those students now will become auto-enrolled in the program. And what I mean by auto-enroll is that they and their parent, they do not need to sign a piece of paper as been the practice and requirement in the past to sign up for the program. Instead, we are going to be using the model that we use with those experiencing foster care, in which we automatically enroll them and then communicate about their eligibility through a period of time and through different mechanisms. We did this on an emergency basis through the governor's office in the fall for, at the time, those being impacted by the pandemic. This legislation then makes that a practice moving forward. So just to recap, this means that a student and their parent does not have to sign an application in those middle school years to be eligible for the program. And we WSAC will be working with OSPI to ensure that we have the information on who's eligible to be able to communicate their eligibility to them. What we do know, well, one of the things maybe to keep in mind for you is that over time we do expect that this will increase the number of overall eligible students, that are then graduating from high school and looking to enroll in post-secondary. So that's the update there. I might just pause and see if anyone has any, or Carla or anyone else monitoring any question. Is there any questions so far? Oh, you're on mute though, Carla, I think.
Will unaccompanied homeless youth, McKinney-Vento, also be auto-enrolled in college-bound scholarship like foster care youth?
So that's a great question. So they would fall into the category just like any other 7th and 8th grader. So they might be unaccompanied, but if the question really is if they're unaccompanied after that 7th or 8th grade year, or in some cases that 9th grade year, they do not still have the same language as foster youth do. So they would not be covered up through grade 12 like foster, those experiencing foster care. So they would be in the same category as this expansion in the 7th and 8th grade year only, and limited ninth grade.
And the next question is the auto enroll feature for 7th through 9th graders into CBS applying only to public schools?
No, so that's also, a good question. And so one I probably should provide a few other details. I think the legislate, and this has been true with College Bound, and nothing about this has changed in College Bound. Private schools in the state of Washington, students attending that are also eligible. They have to be eligible, meet the income eligibility as well. So even though we have auto enrollment moving forward, we will also likely have, or I can say that we will also have a process in which private schools could still have their students sign up through a paper process like currently exists, but they would have to be enrolled. But yes, they could also meet eligibility, and but we just wouldn't have the same ability to have the contact information to be in ongoing communication unless they send their information to us, and we will be doing that type of promotion to make sure that that students who want to sign up and are eligible can do so, not just be auto enrolled.
Next question, are all students eligible to apply?
All students that meet income eligibility requirements. So they have to be at a Washington school in the years that they would be open to this enrollment. So that's primarily 7th and 8th graders that are in free and reduced price lunch. And then there's this small expansion to 9th graders. So if they are in a Washington school during those years and they are in, so I shouldn't say in free and reduced price lunch, certainly if they are, that they qualify, but it's really about their income matching those eligibilities. So they could be that they have income that qualifies them, but they have not enrolled in the free and reduced price lunch program. They still would be eligible. So that those requirements have not changed.
2 more questions. Would that apply to homeschooled students?
Yeah, that's a good question. I might have to follow up on the details, but the short answer is yes. Again, I think that homeschool has to be associated with Washington.
And does ESSB 5321 apply retroactively or only for students in 7th grade for the current school year?
So, and Carla, you could maybe help me this. I think what we have really is 2 things happening here. We have the governor's emergency proclamation that happened in the fall, and that covered at the time, folks that had been middle school students in the kind of the 1920 academic year as well as the 2021 academic year, either of those years. So they would, they were covered by that governor's proclamation. This legislation now then covers folks moving forward.
The last one, how is the income data collected if they are not applying? And I believe this is referring to the unaccompanied homeless youth, but I'm not totally sure.
So I might have to have you repeat that, Carla, or see if I've answered this. The income requirement depends on which income requirement we're talking about, College Bound. But in terms of signing at the time of sort of what we've traditionally called sign up and now will be enrollment in the program, it is either we know that because of a data exchange that they qualify for free and reduced price lunch, or they have self-certified that their income is at that level, and that's where the paper would still exist in some cases. So did I answer the question, Carla?
I believe you did.
Okay, if not, y'all, if you asked the question, I didn't quite get the question right, just send it back in and we'll do our best. Anything else right now, Carla?
Last one, if students are not FERPL eligible but may meet the income level to apply, how are they being notified, or are they being notified of eligibility to sign up for CBS?
Well, and just to clarify the question, I mean, you have to be FERPL eligible to be eligible in the program. Doesn't mean you have to be signed up, but you have to meet those same income criteria. And so that's, you know, and I think we're still going to be promoting the program. Just because we have auto enrollment does not mean that we're not talking about it. It just, and I think that's one of the things with some of the testimony with the that we heard, especially middle school counselors, is they're really excited about having conversations about eligibility for college-bound scholarship. What was really hard is then getting that paperwork in for otherwise eligible students. So those conversations are still going to be happening. All right.
Sorry, that's all, Becky.
Okay. So let's talk about the next bill that passed, 5194. So I'm going to only speak to a very small part of this bill. For those of you at community and technical colleges, this bill has a lot of pieces in it that have to do with equity. If you just kind of read the title, providing equity and access for the community and technical colleges. So there's a lot in there. What I would like to talk specifically about today is first section 9, and this is not only for community and technical colleges. So this is where that title of the bill might be a little bit misleading. Section 9 of this bill changes residency, how a student meets residency in the state of Washington for the purposes of both public tuition as well as state financial aid. So it modifies a section of the residency requirement that has historically been called 1079. We hope that we can stop using that language because we're not sure that it's always very clear. That's a really old bill that when this legislation originally went through. But this is modifying what has been in the past residency requirement that allows a student who has been in the state of Washington 3 years prior to high school graduation or a GED and then continuously since, and that they sign an affidavit indicating that they will pursue citizenship. So this is typically viewed as, you know, residency ability, a pathway for residency for undocumented students, but I just want to be clear in stating that it is not limited to undocumented students. There are other visa statuses and other ways or other students that might qualify for residency through this specific law. But what the modification does here is really very much bring it more in alignment with how U.S. citizens meet citizenship status or residency status, excuse me, for the purposes of in-state tuition and state financial aid. So instead of the 3 years in Washington prior to high school graduation or GED, they must be in a state for 1 year prior to post-secondary enrollment. So really important to keep in mind 2 changes happening here. 3 years to 1 year, and a change in which the language around high school graduation is eliminated. So this means that if you have somebody who has, you know, they attended for example, California high school, but they've been living in the state, you know, for 7 years, or, you know, or longer than 1 year. In the past, they have not been able to meet residency because of that high school requirement. This change would allow that student or prospective student to meet residency. So that's one change. We know that we are going to have to make these changes on the affidavit. And as a reminder, affidavits show up with your residency officers. They have copies that are often required of students, but the affidavit is also included fully on a WSFA application. So I'm just going to stick to a very high level here, but no, and I really encourage you to hopefully you're also going to be attending the residency training sessions that we're offering through, I forget exactly what day, but I promise we're going to show you those dates at the end of the session. And that you not only attend, but public colleges, that you also encourage your residency officer to also attend with you, and to really be coordinated with the implementation of this. This will go into effect for the upcoming academic year, the 21-22 academic year. And so this is an important change to keep in mind. The other thing that I just might say regarding this bill, and I'm going to come back to this undocumented student loan program in a little bit, but it also modifies and puts in alignment language around residency requirements for that program. And as a reminder, that program is not currently active, and I'm going to go into more detail about that in a little bit. Okay, so I think we're going to move, unless there's Carla, any questions for me?
Yes. Do we have an ETA when the online WSFA page and application will be updated with this new language?
Yeah, so we are working internally on that. And as you know, the WSFA is handled through a contractor, but we are hopeful that that will go into effect on July 1st. And we know that that means that you all might have some might have to kind of have or reach out to maybe some students that weren't meeting residency but might be able to now based on this this law change. And so those are some of the additional guidance and additional training that we plan on really providing to you all in partnership with our colleague at WSAC, Gail Wooten, who works with your colleagues, the residency officers. Carla, anything you wanted to add to that one, or did I cover it?
You covered it, thank you. And next question, how will they provide proof of residency?
Yeah, so proof of residency through this mechanism, you know, that goes through a residency officer at a public college. For private colleges, you know, we work on that guidance. But for the most part, I want to say this carefully, because there are times in which residency, there's conflicting information that might require some additional follow-up and requirements. But, you know, typically it is through the affidavit process that is either handled through the affidavit with the residency officer or with on the WSFA. Sometimes there is additional documentation that is required if it appears that there's something in conflict.
For section 9 in the first bullet, is year defined as calendar year or academic year?
It's calendar year. I'm pretty sure that's how we read it. We are, this is one area that I might just put a quick caveat on. And again, there's going to be more guidance and training to come. But this is one of the areas in which we are making sure that we have legal review of the guidance that we're providing. But I believe it's calendar year.
This states in state 1 year prior to post-secondary enrollment. Does this mean that a student who is currently enrolled and has been in the state for more than 1 year, but did not meet the 3-year guidelines, would they now be eligible?
Yeah, so as long as they were in the state and living in the state and not enrolled at your institution for 1 year prior. So, so yes, it does mean that there are some students that have not met residency in the past, because of that 3-year, but can have their residency redetermined. And it would not go back in time, but it would mean that they could meet residency potentially starting in the 21-22 academic year. That's a great question. All right, let's talk about the next one. This one, this is another place where I want to just say thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, this was an unusual situation which we received dollars even in the middle of session, and we allocated it through a fair share model to you all and offered and provided guidance on that. So I know many of you have already really provided emergency dollars to undocumented students for the 2021 academic year. Just a couple of reminders that you do need to provide that funding and fully spend it by June 30th. If you think that you are not going to spend your dollars, we really need to hear from you because we know that other students can benefit, and we want to make sure that we get those dollars out. So as a reminder, we have our memo on our financial aid administrator resources page, and that the reporting will not be done through final interim or unit record, but we will be requesting 3 data points, including your total funds awarded, the number of students served by, whether or not they're undergraduate or graduate. So big thanks to you all. The next slide, oh, Carla, that's my cue. Carla, what questions do you have for me?
We had one question on the prior slide asking if you were going to speak about section 8, the first bullet on slide 15. So if we can back up to that one, perhaps.
The section 8, yes. So I just mentioned that this is changed the law related to a program that is not currently active, but it's kind of come up in a slide or two. The undocumented student loan program. So I'll promise to tie those two together.
All right. And the next question, now that HEERF funds can be awarded to undocumented students, can we allow undocumented students to keep their state emergency grants even if we give them HEERF funding in the future?
Yes, you can. So the guidance that on the memo that's on the financial aid resource page does, I forget exactly the wording. We could pull it up, but it basically says that at the time that you awarded them dollars, they had not received any federal emergency dollars, but it did not preclude you from awarding it in the future if the rules change, and we're now in a situation in which that's the case. So yes, you do not have to pull back any state emergency aid to provide federal emergency funds to undocumented students. Okay, so this slide, just quickly, I wanted to bring your attention to a few other sort of, related legislation. One is the prison to post-secondary education pathways. So Department of Corrections and State Board for Community and Technical Colleges are to work on a plan to assist incarcerated individuals to complete a FAFSA or WASPA. And so we will likely be involved in those conversations, especially ensuring the access for WASPA. So in general, this bill also has a lot of other pieces, very much a desire to ensure that incarcerated individuals have access to post-secondary education where possible. We were really happy to see 1166, which is expanding a pilot program that 4 community colleges and 2 public 4 years are already involved in. So we get to double the size of this pilot. So those of you that are already doing that, that's fantastic. You get we have 1 more year with that pilot, and we get to double the amount of colleges that are participating. And at a high level, this is where these colleges have really committed to and are finding really great ways in which to really support. So this is again kind of offering that support, not just the financial, for students that are experiencing homelessness and have experienced foster care. So we see some connection to Passport here as well, but it's also an expanded expanded eligibility from Passport. And then just a quick note about the Workforce Education Investment Act. So as a reminder, the Workforce Education Investment Act is often the legislation that we talk about as being this historic legislation that created the entitlement part of the Washington College grant. It did a lot of other things, including create a tax, a B&O tax. And so those tax revenues come into the fund, and part of what that revenue is used for is Washington College grant, but it also has other permissible uses. Some of you public colleges also are receiving direct dollars from the Workforce Education Investment Act. The change here through this legislation session was expanding the use of these funds. And I've used a quote here of workforce development, including career-connected learning. And we also saw in this bill a really we think an important change in terms of selection for our health professionals loan repayment program. So this is a program that serves credentialed healthcare providers and really creates a priority of demographically underrepresented health providers in that program. All right, let's see what else we have. I think maybe a couple more slides before you get to, oh, Carla, I have more questions.
Again, just one related to the undocumented student relief grants. Now that they qualify for HERF, are we able to award any of the state funds at this point moving forward? So for institutions that haven't fully expended their allocations, can they?
They can, I believe, if they do it first, if you award the state funds first. And so, or, you know, instead of, I mean, I think you absolutely can continue to expend your through the state guidance based on that guidance. Okay, so now I'm going to take a quick step back in time, and I want to revisit two pieces of legislation that passed in 2020, so more than a year ago. And one was the Undocumented Student Loan Program, and I want to give you a quick update on this. So we talked about it last year in these sessions. And first of all, it does not permit, you know, that program to be active until the 21-22 academic year. Well, we're almost there, but it also was contingent on private donations that then would be matched by state funding. And I wanted to let you know that we have not secured any private donations at this point, but we are going to still be working on it. In the meantime, what we have done is consulted with an organization, the Community Credit Lab, and they will be providing us some guidance and a report actually in the coming month that gives some initial thoughts about how we can really design a program that really serves who it's intended to serve. And I know that they have reached out to maybe some of you over the last 2 months, and really want to thank you for your participation in that. That is not the only conversation that we are going to have about designing this program, but we did want their expertise on that because they're closely connected to potential eligible community and population. So we will continue to work on and hopeful that we can secure private funding, but we have to have private funding before that program is active. This is then tied to the change. So this legislation from last year, this bill, we then had the new bill this year that changed some of the language here and really aligns residency requirements to to that one, points to that same residency requirement of 1 year, prior to post-secondary enrollment. Okay, let's go to the next one. Unless Carla has a question for me.
Is this program for undocumented students only, or just anyone who files a WSFA?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So that program has some language. It's sort of, it's not just anyone who files a WSFA. There's language in this legislation that someone receiving funds in the undocumented student loan program is not eligible for federal aid. So that is probably primarily undocumented students. I think there is language about filing a WSFA, but it also does not, I think, limit it to undergraduate students either. So this is kind of the considerations in some of the program design that has to be done.
Will the loan program only be for public schools?
No, not necessarily. I mean, there's nothing in the legislation that would limit it to public colleges only. So that will be a design consideration. Okay, so the other piece from, again, a year ago, 2021, that we're in various phases of implementing. So this had 3 things that we talked about last year. One was for the Student Achievement Council to adopt an online Pell and college grant, or college grant eligibility calculator, and that is up and working, and we hope that you promote it and use it as a tool for prospective. We think it's primarily used for prospective students, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. The piece that is ongoing and one that really is something to be aware of, and that is that we are to develop, and I would just add, in partnership with you all, consistent definitions for financial aid awards. So we think that there might be some of this already happening based on NASFA guidance and other things. But we know with everything that was going on last year, we had some time to implement it, and we used that time to not work on this. But it is time to pick it back up, and we will do so first with WSAC's financial aid work group in tackling this and coming out with some recommendations, and then we would bring it to the larger financial aid administrator group for feedback. We know that there is some time sensitivity here because a lot of you are working on your award notifications for that 2023 year, even as soon as this coming fall. So we will keep you informed, but know that we did delay conversations on this because it had a delayed implementation date here. And then the other thing I just mentioned that was in this legislation was a financial aid advising day. And through the pandemic and all, that happened. So we advised and provided information on Washington College Grant to OSPI. And this is really requiring high schools to provide information about financial aid once a year. I think that I will be back. Unless I have questions, Carla, I am going to hand it off to Gabrielle and then Marla, and then I'll be back.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabrielle Mitchell-Wurst. You may also know me as Gabi. I'm going to go over the Washington College Grant and College Bound Scholarship portion of this workshop today. And luckily, there has not been a lot of changes this year because all the great changes already happened. So with the Washington College Grant, it's groundbreaking commitment to financial aid for low-income students and individuals. They can now get funding for whatever they like to study pretty much. Apprenticeships, new LNI apprenticeships approved have been put into effect as well. And I wanted to point out that although our advertisements all say 18-month apprenticeships, it is not limited to 18-month apprenticeships. They just need to be approved ones. So with the guaranteed funding, a lot more students have a lot more access to much more education. So along with that, the funding has been increased from 21-22 was 484 million. And for the 22-23, we have received about $503 million. And as you can see, I have a little caveat on the bottom that it was pending the governor's signature, which just happened yesterday. So we're looking pretty good there. Funding for other need-based programs, College Bound, we did get a supplemental for the current year, which is good. We up to 19.9 million. And then it goes back to levels off to on the 21-22 year to 17.3 million. State work studies stayed the same, and passport careers, we did actually get a bit of increased funding for those students. So we're excited about that. So just as a reminder, moving forward, this was, everything from the 2021 year that was implemented keeps moving forward. It's guaranteed funding for eligible students, expanded eligibility went up to 100% MFI, the median family income. Registered apprenticeships, they are parallel with the Washington College grant apprenticeship funding. And the best thing was nobody got allocations this year. Everybody just got to pay their students. All the students that had the unmet need, and aid eligible programs that contained apprenticeships were still able to provide funding for those. So that's separate from the LNI ones. And students' maximum time frame usage is 15 quarters, 10 semesters, or the equivalent hours. For CBS, CBS eligible students need to receive the Washington College grant prior to receiving their College Bound funding. College Bound provides an additional funding for small book allowance. Awards are not prorated. Income for eligible students up to 65% MFI. And the CBS eligible students receive funding up to 65% MFI are eligible for Washington College grant up to the 100% MFI. So even if they're not eligible to meet for the CBS, they can get, or they will get the WCG. So keep that in mind when awarding, that we always want to give them their maximum WCG before they receive their CBS funding. And that's all in the program manual where you can follow the order of state funds on how to apply them. Okay, the Washington College grant award amounts. Maximum award amounts for public institutions cover full tuition and fees. We ask that you award them for all terms. Students, because it is guaranteed, they need to be awarded for all the terms that they're eligible for. Their award amounts are prorated based on their eligibility, the MFI, which goes up to 100%, and by their enrollment level. And once again, they cannot exceed the need. So I know many of you have been wanting the award charts for 21-22. We hear you, we're working on them. Like the little picture says, hang in there. We're almost done. We almost have them done. We want to make sure that everything is correct before we send them out, because we'd rather them take a day or two longer to get them out versus sending out the wrong information. So we hear you, and we are working diligently to get those out to you. So you should see them in a few days or so. So with that, the income eligibility, again, moving forward on, goes up to 100%. And as you can see, for a family of 4 for the MFI cap, is up to $102,000, and they will get the 10% prorated. So students, with a pretty good income are now being considered for the Washington College grant. So operationally, we're still doing reporting like we always have. That hasn't changed. So interim reports 4 times a year. The 4th one is the reconciliation, which is the most important to make sure we get all the monies squared away and the data for the forecasting. Along with that, we do want to remind you and thank many of you for getting your payments in on a timely basis. We request that you try to get those in at least once a month to do payment requests. Since moving into the guaranteed funding, it's very important for us to get this information, to get it to the forecaster so we know what the program is costing. And this year is, a very special and unique year with COVID. It's going to be interesting to see how the final comes out and how it really affected everything. So this is a chart that we show every year, the unserved students, and we know that they continue to decline. This information is based on the unit record, so we don't have the most this current year, but I do have good news to say that the little gold marking there that shows the unserved will no longer be there. So we will officially be at fully served. The next reporting cycles, we're going to start showing them as need met. So students who were qualified to receive aid but didn't need it because their needs were met with other types of funds. So this one will start changing over the years. Okay, everybody's favorite topic, interim reporting. The dates are set for the next year. And just to let you know, we do give 4 weeks prior to the due dates. It does open 4 weeks early. So you do have all that time to reconcile your students. And we tried to make sure we gave the final interim report is not over the 4th of July weekend. So you have a little bit more time to celebrate for that as well. This year's is coming up July. The due date is July 12th. So again, you don't have to work over the 4th of July weekend if you don't want to. We just need you to include your reconciled data. We will be requesting funds due to or due from WSAC from the colleges. So any of the students' funds that you need to return to us, we need to have that all cleaned up. And then funds for the new year may not be drawn until all funds are reconciled, returned for your specific college. So the sooner you get your information in, the sooner you return funds, the sooner you're able to start awarding your students for the following year. And then unit record, that's the other fun report that you all love. That for the 2021 year, so this year that we're completing now, they're going to start having the training webinars starting in August. So you should be hearing from Anne. And the rest of the dates are there. The interim reporting and some of these timelines are also in the program manual, which will be coming out shortly as well. So you don't have to memorize the dates at this time. Finally, so we are moving our student resources off of Ready, Set, Grad. That's kind of fading out. So if you've noticed or not, a lot of the information is already now starting to go onto the Washington Student Achievement main page. Most of them are going to be the WSAC / we have apply. The WASPA will be moving shortly. But don't worry, all of it is going to be rerouted from the original URLs. So those will still be active for probably about at least 6 months to a year. So Everybody will be redirected, but wanted to bring it to your attention that we are moving away from the Ready, Set, Grad platform. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. Otherwise, I will pass it on to Marla. I do see Anne put up a comment.
The unit record closure date is October 11th. It is opening on October 9th. We'll follow up with clarification on that for everyone.
Right, so we'll have it corrected on the PowerPoint when we get that sent out next week. In the next following couple days or so.
Okay. And a question, where can we download today's slides? They'll be sent out by email after the sessions are concluded.
Okay, thank you. And I will pass it on to Marla.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Was Becky going to advance these slides?
I can do that for you.
Okay, I don't have it open. I will just be giving a pretty broad overview of the state work study. There haven't been significant changes for the 21-22 year.
Sorry, that was me going a little crazy.
Why? And as most of you know, if not all of you, Jeff deserted us during the first part of May, and I miss him sorely. So many of you get to work with me now, and Debbie Jackson, who is doing a terrific job with State Work Study. So we are doing our best.
Marla, just
Yes.
the PowerPoint slides are not showing.
Yeah, are you going to bring them up, Gabi?
Yeah, let me see how to get him to share again. Sorry for the technical difficulties. All right.